Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for a really cool talk that we're going to be doing about the idea of should relief veterinarians be paid on production. We've got three great panelists. Ivan is joining us shortly. I think he's being paid hourly. So there he is. Boom. He shows up right on time. He's not getting on production, he's hourly. So there he is for us. And we've got a really cool group of people. I'm going to give everyone the opportunity to sort of introduce themselves, but I want to set a little bit of a groundwork and a foundation of what we're talking about here. If you just signed up, if you happen to stumble into this webinar, welcome. If you are gearing up to hear some hot ideas, this is a great place to be. So the idea of what we wanted to bring to everyone was just the conversation around the idea that a lot more veterinarians are switching to relief work. We're seeing a increase of relief work as a real career opportunity and it growing for a lot of DVMs in the space. And the interesting topic, though, was that according to the AVMA last year, relief veterinarians make up over 9% of the veterinary workforce, and it's up from 6% where it was last year. The interesting thing, though, that was a twist, a lot of us think about relief work as a way to balance work-life balance. But in the AVMA survey, they found that relief veterinarians were the only ones that reported an increase in burnout since the pandemic. I know Dr. Lovegrove's going to bring us some other ideas around that as well, but this was what the AVMA was bringing to us. And they also surveyed them to show that they were saying they were the least satisfied with the profession as a whole. So what we want to explore today with everyone is there a gap? Is there an issue of what we're doing? Is there an unforeseen challenge in how relief veterinarians are being compensated and participating in the industry? And should we think about the different ways that they're retained by groups, that they're retained by places that help them find that relief work, or even within practices? So I'm going to hand it over to our panelists to introduce themselves. I'm going to kick it off with a president, because you always got to start with the president whenever you get to that. So Dr. Jessica Lovegrove is the president of the Relief Veterinary Medical Association and a relief veterinarian. Dr. Lovegrove, why don't you give us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, thank you so much, Ryan. I'm very excited to be here. Very excited to be representing relief veterinarians in this conversation. I'm hoping to do well. I am the founding president of the new organization, Relief Veterinary Medical Association. We are the only organization that is trying to currently push the interest in a nonprofit way for relief veterinarians. We are currently a leadership board of 9 strength and very excited to be present here. I'm also a relief veterinarian myself. I work out of Tennessee. I've been in veterinary medicine since 2019, and COVID was a big reason I got pushed into relief medicine. It was a bit of intended to be a temporary position while I tried to figure out something else. And I found a love for it, and I found a place where my own burnout could be managed, but also I could help manage my colleagues' burnout as well. And so that was something that I became very passionate about. Additionally, I'm passionate about communication training and how that can affect our ability to manage our own burnout. So I'm very excited to be here, and I'm excited for the discussion.
Wonderful. Well, we're happy to have you. Thank you so much. Next, we've got Grace Wu Ursery. Grace is the founder of Vet Money Geek, which is a business consultant, and she is a business consultant. It is, she is, they are, we is a business consultant and financial coach for veterinary professionals and practices. Grace, give us a little bit more and don't let me stumble over it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ryan. After several decades of being in vet med as a technician, as a CVPM and practice management, I was the one that was either having to work with relief veterinarians, having to hire them, having to cut the check, talk to the boss afterwards, deal with the clients afterwards, and also just trying to network and find, the next relief vet that needed to fit into my practice. And now as a financial coach for business operations, it's a different lens because now we're also talking about profitability. We're talking about revenue. We're talking about, can we sustain, the client care that comes in. So I think this topic is really interesting because of the different perspectives and motivations to keep our veterinary practices thriving.
Awesome. Well, we're really happy to have you. Next, we have Dr. Andrew Ciccolini. Andrew is co-founder of Serenity Vet, which is a relief platform for high-performing relief veterinarians. Andrew, give us a little bit more about you.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan, and thanks to all the panelists for joining. My name's Andrew Ciccolini. I'm a veterinarian living in Colorado. Have experience in a lot of different areas in vet med. So started in the military, have experience in private practice, academia, have done relief work myself, and even nonprofit work, and now helped co-found Serenity Vet. Our hope is to make relief work a more sustainable business for people that are interested in that, to provide financial security and work-life balance, all the things that we think of when it comes to relief vet. We want to make that easier for them. And then also on the clinic side, we want to help make using relief vets profitable for businesses, because that'll make the industry more sustainable long term.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew. And Ivan, like I said, right on time. Perfect entrance into the moment here. Finally, our last panelist is Dr. Ivan Zakharenkoff. Ivan is the founder of Galaxy Vets, which is an employee-owned urgent care group in the United States and Canada. Ivan, if you can hear me and if we can get gotcha, it's your turn to say hello.
Hello, I apologize because I'm on the road between the hospitals and I was in a perfect sound location. So now I am switching and I'm going to be stationary in a second. Really sorry, guys, but thank you for the introduction and invitation me here.
Yep. And by way of introduction, I'm Ryan Leach. So I am going to be your moderator today. I'm also got a team that's in the background here that's putting everything together, monitoring the chat. So if you guys have questions, if you want to ask our panelists something, if there's something that I'm missing, if there's something that you go, whoa, hold on, that was a crazy idea, throw it in the chat. We're going to be monitoring that. We're going to be feeding those questions into our panelists as we go. But again, I'm Ryan Leach. I'm the host of The Bird Bath, which is a weekly news podcast where I hit on all the topics that you need to know. It's less than 15 minutes every Tuesday morning, so make sure to check that out. And we talk about a lot of important things, and this is just another one of those awesome topics to be able to dive a little bit deeper into. So let's get into it, as I like to say on the show. So I want to hit first off on the idea of pay. The big thing that we're seeing is there are a lot of different compensation models. Compensation models are always discussed not only for relief veterinarians, but also for full-time veterinarians working in a clinic. And there are a lot of different models. And Grace, one thing that you said at the beginning there was you were the one that was cutting the check. So what were some of the different models that you saw relief veterinarians being paid, and how did that sort of impact the conversation that you had signing them up, having them come back, having your clients be happy, having your coworker, having the boss be happy? What did you see when you were doing all of that?
Yeah, I think especially for independent practices, relief veterinarians was it was never something that they just said, okay, let's throw it on the schedule. There was either a sense of urgency or a lack of supply, right? So something happened unexpectedly. So it's typical supply and demand. You're gonna pay top dollar because as a private practice owner, if you're a single doctor practice or you're 1.5 doctor practice, nobody can cover that shift, and you want to keep your doors open, not only for your clients, but also for your staff, right? You don't want to suddenly be out 2 days for your team. So a lot of that was just like, get somebody in, call the people that we know that we've used in the past, but get somebody in and we'll pay whatever. So I think there's a sense of urgency that is not based on, actual business decision making in terms of like, there's a dollar associated to it. So I think knowing that there's an emotional reaction there can be a bit of a disadvantage for the hiring practice.
Okay. And then Jessica, you, I think probably we could say you have the most relief practice experience, hands-on, on the floor, really doing the relief work. What did you see as a relief vet in different types of compensation and scheduling, and sort of what did you hear is popular as well through your association?
Yeah. So, and I would say Definitely. I'll speak from my own experience, and then I polled several relief veterinarians, so I'll pull that
Awesome.
information in as well for you guys, just to have some numbers in front of us. But myself, I work currently completely independently. I have worked with relief organizations like RSVP and RU in the past, but currently where I'm at, especially in the rural areas, it's more independent myself. I am a per diem per hour rate with an overtime pay rate. And my rate varies based off of if it's a general practice, if it's local to me, if I have to drive a distance. So I do charge a little extra if I'm having to go further away. And so that's how I structure my pay. Across the board, when I look at the way most people do, when I polled, I had 93 responses, and 62 of those responses said that they do a set hourly rate, most with an overtime pay. 29% said they do per diem rate. And then 3% said that they had some varied structure that included some form of production pay on top of that. And so that is across the board. And then I had a couple of occasional random responses that did something specialized. And so that is across the board. The majority rate is set hourly rate without a production bonus or pro sal model.
Awesome. And so, you know, the thing that was interesting, and obviously we'll loop Ivan in on some of the employer questions, but one of the things that I know, and I'll put some words in his mouth, and because he's not here to defend himself on it, but I know that there was a conversation. I was alongside Ivan on the founding team with Galaxy Vets, which they are growing and thriving the business, and there was a question of, does production pay motivate people, or should we just pay people to be there and do their best work, and, you know, have them own part of the practice and participate in those sort of things. And I think that the catalyst that we found in the data of owning practices was that it was really difficult to take away production pay from full-time veterinarians that were working in the clinics. And that was a really strong motivator for people to be aligned in things. And especially when they don't have an ownership stake or that long-term relationship in the practice. There is sort of that desire. There's some transactional components, right? It's not exclusively a gut feeling, like Grace, like you said. It's not always a business decision. It's going to be an expensive opportunity there. So, Andrew, going to Serenity Vet, you guys are the first relief platform to introduce production bonuses. And I think that's, when we were posting this and getting people talking about it, I think that the wording probably can confuse some people and get people curious about what's going on. What inspired that decision? How does that actually work? What does that look like for you? And then I'd love to sort of bring it around to the panel as well to talk about what that means.
Yeah. So first, like you said, I want to clarify how it works. It is paid as a production bonus. So if you accepted a shift that a clinic offered where they had a production pay attached to it, you would still receive a guaranteed rate for that day. So hourly or per diem rate. And we did that because, having been a relief vet myself, I know, like, there's so many things outside of my control going into a clinic that I don't regularly work at that I wouldn't be willing to accept straight production because I just never know exactly how that's going to go. But then we added a production option. So if on that day I happen to produce a lot more than, would pay my regular base rate, say $1,000 for the day, I could actually make more on top of it based on production. And why we started offering that was really just feedback from the market. So what we were hearing from the clinic side is we see kind of two different players in the market. There's kind of, like Grace was alluding to, there's that like emergency, I need a relief coverage, I just need to fill this gap. And those people aren't very price sensitive. Like, they're kind of willing to pay what they need to just to fill the day, but it's not necessarily a profit driver for that clinic because they just want to fill the gaps. And then we heard from clinics that they would still like to use relief vets in a profitable way, and they think they can help it drive revenue in their business. However, what they were struggling with was finding relief vets willing to be able to do higher producing services like surgery or dentistry or ER work or urgent care, those types of services that really drive a lot more revenue. And so we kind of threw out this idea of, well, maybe if we offer a production-based pay, it might incentivize more relief veterinarians that want to offer those services to provide them for clinics.
So, just so I'm dissecting this a bit, the idea here is it was not only driven by the relief veterinarian saying, "Hey, we want to perhaps share in the upside of that," but you guys also got the feedback from practices that it was something that they wanted to use to drive different behavior. Is that right?
Yeah, it was really both sides. And like, I mean, I think about, working relief at a ER urgent care, like that seems to be like the best use case. Like you could go in and see no patients and, sit there all day, or you could bring in $15,000 in revenue for that practice on a day. And if you're just getting paid a base rate of $1,500, like you kind of really missed out. And so we're seeing a lot of interest more in emergency relief with those veterinarians really liking this model.
Very cool. I think that's definitely interesting. That's what brought us here, right? The idea of talking about it a bit. When you're looking at that, and Jessica, you've got some of that data from people that you've talked to as well. Who do you think? And I guess let me take one step back. How large is the Relief VMA right now?
Relief EMA is currently membership base wise at our last audit was around 150 membership base.
That's awesome.
That being said, we can tap into so I can tap into some of the relief Facebook groups and just read comments. I try not to, directly share commentary directly from there because they are private platforms and we want to make sure that we're providing people safe spaces to speak on them. But I do kind of talk with my fellow relief vets, and that's how I try to formulate my opinions because I don't want to just bring my own opinions to this conversation. I want to bring the wider relief opinion. But there's over 4,000 relief vets that I have access to have conversation with. To just kind of hear their thoughts in this topic. So I hear different things. The large amount of people are anti the production pay concept for, again, varied reasons. It comes down to for some people, sometimes it's ethical reasons. Sometimes it's the lack of control in the clinic structure. Sometimes it's a trust issue and the ability to trust that the clinic's going to be honest when it comes around to saying, they made $15,000 this day, versus, they really made $15,000, but we're going to report that they made $8,000. There's those conversations as well happening. But some of them aren't against it. We have some conversation. I had some conversations with some lovely individuals that had good trust with their clinics. They built up a good rapport of trust with their long-term clinics. And they had said, hey, I am interested in that production rate, not willing to reduce my base pay rate, but a long-term production incentive is not something I'm anti having. Certainly more relief vets that do the ER structure, I can see being confident in that. And the relief vets that build a constant rapport, so the relief vets that do like where I build a relationship with my clinic and I'm in and out of that clinic more commonly, they tend to have more of a willingness to do a production scale just because they feel like they know the staff.
That's really helpful. And I know I think I've got you now. We've known each other for a few years, so there's background understanding that I have. You worked a lot of relief shifts in ERs while building SmartFlow. And I think that's obviously helped understand some of your ideas around production pay and how you look at that. What do you think of as an employer, and then also as a former relief veterinarian and as someone that employs vets, is a vet, those sort of things? How do you see the relief pay working, and who would you say should jump into it? Who should, keep their guard up?
Can you guys hear me well? I apologize for
good.
the connection. This platform for some reason wasn't picking up. I'm very surprised that this is a controversial topic. This is very interesting. So, personal experience as a veterinarian, doing locum for 20 plus years, mostly in emergency, but some in GP. There's two types of days that I had. One is you're sitting there and you're thinking, how the hell they can afford paying me because we don't have any patients. We don't have control over them. You're not doing the marketing. You're not, and that's the clinic's problem. The same as when, your boss or consolidator comes in and says, you're not producing enough. Well, what the hell does that mean? I don't see enough patients. which is your job to bring the patients to me, then I will treat them appropriately as needed. That's very simple. So some days I was sat there and I thought, how are they affording to pay me? And the second type of shift is when I did 2 splenectomies and foreign body, and then brought in, $15,000-$20,000 in a shift, and I'm understanding that I'm paid, $100 an hour. Then all of a sudden I'm thinking, well, this is a ripoff because I produced all of this value for this clinic, and I should be compensated for it. So this structure was really a no-brainer for us because we looked at it, and most locums or relief vets that I've seen, they're paid per hour, and there's never a blended compensation. So what we've done right now, especially in Atlantic Canada, we're in a week we'll be in 5 facilities, and we said, look, if you produce, and we pay 25% of production, which is in ER, it's high, but that's what we do. And then essentially we give the same thing to locums. So why would relief vets not do that? And essentially it's, yes, everybody has their own rate, or we provide the rate. That's a base. You get that regardless. But if you had a rough day, it was back to back, and you were running off your feet, there should be compensation for that. So we essentially pay whatever is the highest. And you know, I understand the different, and I can get into that, between the urgent care, emergency, and GP. But it's very simple. You finish the shift, you can look at how much money you brought into the till. It should be a number. Now, I appreciate, Jessica, if there's no trust with the clinic, but I recommend people not work for the clinics that you don't trust to provide the number. Like, I mean, we're a pretty ethical profession. If I had any doubt in my employer, even for one day, that they will ethically will report to what I produced, I wouldn't be working for. But I think that for ER and urgent care, it's a no-brainer. You just basically give more money for people that work more, and we do that, and we win all the locums locally. So our base pay will round up, depending on people's rate, and like $1,200, $1,500 a day. Our relief vets make $2,500 to $3,500 a day, and why would they say no to it? So to me, it's very simple. Now with the GP, it's difficult because there's puppy programs, there's plans, there's wellness plans. You can't really sequester from that. So now, if you've seen 10 people that prepaid for plans, you can't really, how do you get it out of that? So that's a little bit of a difficulty. How do you estimate that production? But that could be a separate conversation.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so, Andrew, is that something that when you're looking at that for Serenity, do you think about that? And also maybe to throw it to everyone, I'd love to hear the idea of how relief veterinarians are looking at where they want to spend those relief hours, right? So, Andrew, when you're looking at the structure of that clinic, is there the idea of saying, yes, this clinic offers wellness plans. Yes, they have, care credit on board or scratch pay, they offer alternative payment methods. Like, do you like to show that to the veterinarians and to the relief veterinarians? And then on the veterinary side and the practice management side, is that something that you guys think is important to visualize to everyone?
It's actually not something we had thought of. This is really new to us, and we're trialing it out. And so I actually love that idea. I think that'd be a really good thing to bring into the platform so they have a better understanding going into it. And we have a question from a viewer, Melissa, who asked specifically about bundled services. And I think it's always a challenge when there's a production model and every clinic has some type of structure to account for those bundled services for production, but it's usually lower, right? And that's the big complaint, even in a full-time or part-time model. If you're being paid production, it's like, well, I don't make as much on these puppy plans and stuff. And so from a relief standpoint, they would be accounted for the same as it would for a person that worked at that clinic.
And then, Grace, is that something that, as a practice, and if you're guiding your clients and the practices that you work with, is that something that you think would be an additional benefit or a driver to help them attract and retain those high-level relief doctors? Because I personally, as a pet owner, I have one very visceral experience with the relief situation. My dog was brought in. He was scheduled for surgery. The doctor that I normally see wasn't there. They said, Dr. XYZ is here. Everything's great. It was a nightmare. And I called him and they said, oh, you were the fourth person to call with a complaint about him since we've had him a couple of times. I said, maybe don't invite him back. Like, but so that's a completely unrelated topic, but I think that was something like as a clinic, how you're viewing that. Is that something you want to
Well,
drive those?
that's totally connected, right? Reputation goes both ways. And I think that's what we all have to keep that in mind for the relief veterinarian, how you perform essentially in terms of like client care in the exam room, but also how you perform with the team. And if you're out of sync with that team's culture and how they utilize the rest of their staff members, because that's not a model that you have been able to utilize successfully other places, and you're just out of sync with them, that does build a potentially negative reputation. On the flip side, if you walk in as a very highly competent, versatile, adaptable relief vet, and that practice did not set you up for the fact that they did not have XYZ resources, whether that is a competent technician that can do all your dental extractions for you, the things that they rely on to say, hey, going to pass this off to you so that me as the veterinarian, I move on to my next patient case, and you guys handle all the diagnostic gathering, or whatever that workflow is. If that communication hasn't been set up, then you're flying in there blind. So I feel very empathetic to both sides, and that's what I mean by for practices that bring on a relief veterinarian, a new relief veterinarian, is that they are taking a gamble out there, so hence, that idea of maybe production plus a base is very intriguing, because, hey, I'm going to give you a reasonable, but maybe it's on the lower end of reasonable base, but I also don't want to screw you over if you turn out to be a rock star for me. And then for the veterinarians, they're walking in, they don't know if like you're even going to have the right stethoscope, so you travel with your own, right? So I think that to be very aware that relief veterinarians do have to carry a lot of their own risk and liability. It just looks different from both sides of that coin.
So yeah, Ivan, let me ask Jessica one question, and I'll jump to you. I was going to ask Jessica, so with that idea, we have a question about that relief veterinarian being integrated into the practice. And there's dozens of different technology tools. There's all different lab equipment. There's all those sort of things. What do you think is that expectation that you have for yourself and that other relief veterinarians should have for themselves of preparedness for the unexpected?
I'm going to firstly qualify this. Every relief veterinarian is different. I think that I'm going to speak from a very personal side of my opinion on this. And some relief veterinarians may not agree with me. But I myself see myself as a business. I am a business owner. I'm a business person. When I'm walking into your business, if I am not doing right by your business, I shouldn't be there. That is the first and foremost when I walk in that door. My responsibility is to come in, be present, be professional, be great with your staff, have your staff love me, have your clients love me. My responsibility is to build that rapport. I taught one of my big communication lectures that I have is building rapport in 30 seconds. That is my responsibility, to be capable of doing that and being that person that can walk in and pick up as if I've always been there. And so I have to have some knowledge about different, sedation techniques, different ability to treat different things different ways, different medications. And if I don't know how, I need to be able to pick up and learn that very rapidly. And so I have that requirement. That's what I am seeing. And I'm supposed to, I apologize if you can hear my dogs barking in the background.
Those are allowed on these types of panels. That's why we work in vet med.
But I am not doing right by my clinics if I can't do that. I also have a very strong opinion that I don't charge production because if I walk in and we don't have a very productive day due to one reason or another, it rained and half the clients canceled. That's not my fault. But also, if I walk in that same day and I'm running my tail off and I'm very productive for that clinic, well, great. Now I've made up for that day that we weren't very productive. And so I have this concept of my base rate is what it is because that's what I need to live on. That's what I need to pay my bills. That's what I need to move forward. And that's what I feel that I am worth as a veterinarian in my going forward, because we always talk about charge your worth. I think across the board, we can all agree the veterinary profession is woefully underpaid at every level. And so I think that that's a very big conversation for me. When I walk in, I make what I need to make to pay my bills and live comfortably as a person and as a human being, because I am a human being. But I also understand that that's very important for the clinic itself. But my job is to keep the doors open. Sometimes I'm not going to be productive, and that's okay. It's also okay if I'm greatly productive and I'm being underpaid for me. And those balance out in my book. I have had more than one clinic inform me that I am a productive veterinarian, and that is my goal. That is a high praise for me. That means I'm practicing good medicine in my mind, and that is my goal as medicine. I never want to feel pushed to provide a service to make a dollar. I always want to make sure it's the right thing for that client and that patient at the end of the day.
That's very interesting. Ivan, does your question still fit? You want to jump in?
No, we can go with the flow.
Okay. Well, it's funny, when you're talking about this, Jessica, I have 2 little 3-year-old girls, and my wife and I will have, not to say relief veterinarians or babysitters in any way, but maybe sometimes it feels like babysitting. And if we go out to date night, sometimes those girls fall right asleep, and the babysitter got to hang out and watch, Netflix all day long. And sometimes they're up still trying to burn the house down at 10 o'clock when I get home, right? We don't pay a different rate for when they're there. But it's an interesting thought. And I guess the difficult thing, though, is you also do kind of grade who you want to work with. Well, you put them to bed easier. That was faster. That worked well. I liked that. So that's very important. One thing that I thought was really, really interesting in what you said was how you talk about being a relief veterinarian as a business. And I do consulting as a job. And so you're looking at my whole business here. I have awesome people that help support me, but I look at it the same way in that sense. And one of the things that I know I like is the opportunity to do different things each and every day, which I think is one of the things that attracts a lot of people to relief work. Ivan, you've been a big speaker and a big proponent of burnout prevention. And when you built Galaxy Vets, the idea there was taking all of the research and all the work done around burnout prevention and including that into building out a group and how you compensate people. Where do you feel like relief work fits into that? Where do you feel like compensation fits into all of that? And just take us through that journey a bit.
So that's actually a very interesting question. So the spoiler alert is that right now I'm fully committed to paying production to relief veterinarians. And in my career, when I was a relief veterinarian, I never ever was on production and refused to. So, and the reason for it was exactly what Jessica proposed. The one thing, that overarching feeling that I had, is that the burnout is more severe when you are dependent on production. And it's interesting because we've done 3 studies cross industry. There's 2,000 to 3,000 people that responded to surveys 3 years in a row. And one of the questions we asked was about the production versus salary. When we started building Galaxy, we acquired a couple of clinics and we put everybody on salary. So we thought that that's going to prevent burnout. Well, people found a way how to basically lie to us, how to manipulate the system to not do the work, and how to still receive the full salary. It was devastating to me because I considered our profession highly ethical, and things that I've seen that was done genuinely to prevent burnout and put people on salary were basically cheating. And then we ran the study, and then one of the questions was about the compensation, and then we compared it. So it's not like, are you burned out because you're paid this way? It wasn't like that. So we measured the burnout in general in all the people that went through survey, and then in parallel we asked the question: are you compensated on production per cell or salary? Anyway, the conclusion was that actually people that are on production have better understanding of their future, or at least certainty in it. And the inference from that was that they're actually less burned out than people on salary, which is very interesting and proven myself wrong. But that in combination of alignment of incentives. I love what Jessica said about relief veterinarian is a business. I find that when I work as a relief veterinarian, I come in to be productive, to bring revenue, to work well with the staff, to attract the clients, to want them to invite me back again. So if the situation, like Grace said, I'm coming in, techs are not productive, equipment is not there, the beauty of relief is that I don't have to come back. I've seen it once, goodbye. So basically, that is the beauty of being the relief. But with the clinics that I love, they literally had my calendar that I provided to them. And I said, you see these days available? You book me in. They had all access to my Google Calendar. Serenity wasn't there at that time. So I used my Google Calendar. They booked me in. I didn't even have to confirm. I would come in 5 clinics that I love. And then basically I would do shifts there. So I think that unfortunately, what I see a lot right now with the relief vets is that when there's a category of veterinarians that basically do a very limited scope of services, so they don't do surgery, they don't do certain things. They want very specific hours. I'm all for work-life balance, but it also doesn't serve the clinic as a business that pays you money. So I think that this concept of I'm a business bringing business to you and we collaborate is very important. So from the burnout prevention perspective, we did find out that production is actually better for you, but and from business. So I think there's an alignment in this concept. And there was a question that I read in the chat. It was from Bob, who said that he runs a 5 DVM practice and would definitely offer production to relief vets if they offer me a lower base. The way that we pay, it's not in addition to base. If whatever is higher, so it is the job of an owner of the business, at least for me. I'm not telling everybody how to run their business, but for me to be certain on what the minimum I go. And the concept of production is because I know that it's always more. So I'm incentivizing people, and that base doesn't matter, really. Is it high or low? As long as production is going to be higher than that, then we're golden. So it doesn't matter what that base is.
Yeah, that's interesting. And to take it back to the burnout piece, Andrew, I know Serenity Vet had a really cool announcement coming out around trying to get more understanding around how burnout affects relief veterinarians specifically. Can you tell us a little bit about that survey, what people should expect to see from that, and then how before, so we can almost maybe put a line in the sand of Serenity Vet before the survey and then post survey, and maybe how you guys expect to interact with those results.
Yeah, I mean, you kicked off the webinar, reminding us all that AVMA said that burnout is increasing among relief veterinarians. And so we're launching this survey to try to understand better why, like what is happening in the relief market that is causing relief vets to be more burned out, and seeing if there's anything we can do to help the market build some tools within Serenity Vet to help reduce that burnout. And so we've actually teamed up with Talkatoo on this. So Talkatoo's AI scribe software. If you're not familiar with it, they're helping us run this. And they'll actually give you 3 months free of their software if you fill out this survey. So there's some incentive to do it as well, because we really want to kind of understand better what's going on and seeing what we can do. Again, going back to making this a sustainable career for people. What do we need to do to reduce burnout? That's what we're trying to achieve.
So obviously there's always assumptions, right, of what we think are happening, what the courses that are happening in the space, and then the survey and getting that data is always helpful. What is Serenity Vet doing today in the structural way that it's built with the intention of reducing burnout?
I think it's just really trying to simplify the process, right? Like it can be a lot of work to run your business from a relief standpoint all on your own. And we're going to provide those tools to help make it easier to provide some financial projections and planning, and just for both the veterinarians and the clinic side, really, like we just want to make this a much easier and smoother process to reduce the workload that it takes to do this long term.
Yeah. Ivan, you had a comment?
I think important piece as well is so the big there's a couple of phases or stages to when people jump into relief, and again, at least I went through them. So when you're deciding, okay, I'm going to do this thing, there's uncertainty. Am I going to make a living? Are there enough clinics around me that I can sustain my expected income, just like I did the full-time position? So so I think that with that, if you can have a look at that, and I know Serenity has a couple of tools like that to look at surrounding clinics and see if there's enough business that exists there, and also with the personal tools, where as a relief veterinarian, you can build out your sort of pro forma, like a budget. I want to get there. This is because I was never able to do it. I actually burned out and ultimately, committed suicide, survived. And because I just kept running, I didn't know if I can feed my family, if I can, and I added more and more and more. I could not separate if it's, my birthday, my wife's birthday, whatever it is. I'll take another shift because it's available. So I constantly ran on, 30 out of 30 days a month. And that's, I think that big piece of uncertainty is removed with instruments like that.
That's great. Yeah. And so, Jessica, what are those stressors that you're hearing from relief vets? And also, if you could isolate them out from financial stressors, which we all feel and we can't escape ever, unfortunately, and then just those personal stressors. What are those things that you think are weighing on the relief industry?
Yeah, I can tell you right now, one of the biggest stressors that's probably going to start coming about. We had a big boom when COVID happened, and I think that we are going to start seeing kind of some tapering off of that boom. Those, we're already starting to see in some of the markets that got flooded pretty early on. So I have some colleagues in Colorado who have had to either take a part-time position or have had to, move into other markets because of the fact that the market's flooded with relief vets, and you start talking about having to lower rates or potentially not making enough to cover your bills and to be able to live the way that you choose to live. And that has been a big conversation that's starting to move. And I think what we're going to see is the relief vets that are making an effort to build these rapports with these clinics and treating it like the business and treating it like it is, an important part of it. Those are going to be the people who really thrive in this moment. But I do see the stress of, all the time people saying, oh, we're going into a recession, we're going to not be hired as often. And I can tell you right now, I don't have that concern personally. I don't have the concern that my clinics aren't going to call me tomorrow because they're not going to have a spot for me. I am still at the point where I'm turning away more work than I am being able to keep. And so that is potentially a personal result as how I've tried to stage my business, but also I think just a mark that we're going to have the people that will thrive through this, and the people, the markets that won't thrive are going to be the ones that have been flooded early on. I think Texas is probably in a flood zone. I think Colorado is in a flood zone. But I think that those people, if they're willing to kind of branch out, still will have the ability to go outside of those areas. I think also the ability to be flexible in what you're willing to provide and do is going to come into play. But that is stressful. So, for instance, surgery is hard for me. I have injuries to my hands that make it hard for me. I will do surgery, but I will tell every vet clinic I'm not a productive surgeon because of the fact that I have to go a lot slower, and I tend to slow down the more surgeries I do in the day. 1 or 2 is fine, but after that, my suturing, my spay time goes from a 30-minute spay to an hour and a half spay as the day wears on because of the fact that it takes me that much longer with my hands. And so you have those personal factors that do affect that concern of, oh my gosh, am I going to have to start providing more services? Also, some people just are really hesitant to go into a practice they don't know and do a surgery. I go to practices where I look in there and the monitoring, and I can tell you right now, Dr. Ivan, I assure you, I go into practices that you probably would have walked into and said, I will never come back here. And I love them. But I can tell you right now that that's a concern, is what do I have to offer? What do I have to be willing to do? And where is my license going to be risked? We're an easy scapegoat. I'm an easy scapegoat. I'm going to be the first person to get thrown on the bus if something goes wrong, probably. And so that is a big concern I have. Do I have trust of my clinics that they're not going to scapegoat me? And yes, my clinics trust the board. Yeah, I do. But there are relief vets that walk in there one day and they'll never go back. What's going to happen when they walk out the door? What are they going to say to their clients that complain? Are they going to support you as a colleague, or are they going to say, oh yeah, they're awful? Yeah, ignore them. Definitely take them to the board. Don't take us. What did the technician do when you weren't looking and you didn't know that they were, pulling that tooth that you walked out of the room for, and they're not allowed to pull that tooth in the state you're in. So there's all those questions, and it's a big stressor. Scheduling is a big stressor. I also would like to say, I think that people walk into the relief field being more burned out. I think that we are probably higher prone to burnout as far as we go. I think that that's probably a big reason why we see burnout in relief, is just because of that. One of the things I like about relief is I'm getting burned out. I'm the only one to blame. I need to take a break. And so I can't blame anybody else for it. It's my fault. And so I can really say, okay, it's time to step back and reduce how many shifts I'm working.
Nice. Andrew, I think you had a comment?
I think Ivan actually did.
Okay. I get you guys confused, Honest mistake.
Why? Are we the two bald white guys? So Jessica, question to you. Do you do relief work in Atlantic Canada? Because we would love to have you. I think what's happening, and again, some people might not like what I will say right now. We've been extremely lucky as the industry for two things. One is the business. We never had to do marketing. If you think about COVID, pre-COVID, and veterinary clinics, yes, we do social media and all this stuff, but most clinics book, week 2 out. Now it's diminishing. Last 12 quarters, our profession is going 2 to 3%, diminishing new patient flow. So our fundamentals of the industry and the macro scenario is actually changing, and investment is looking different in the industry. So we're having less patients. It's not COVID. So we need to learn in the clinics how to do marketing and how to actually win the clients, because we never had to do that. Now, for relief veterinarians, the same thing happened during the COVID, because we did not have enough workflow because of the 6 feet curbside assistance and all other nonsense that we had to do during COVID. Relief and actually urgent care were 2 outflows for the clogged system with the too many patients, not enough vets. And I believe that some vets became complacent, and they're not handling it as a business, and they're not competitive. So if we're going into this situation where now there's less shifts and they're paid less, it's not true, because if you're doing production, just be better. And I think that is the important thing. And it doesn't mean rob the clients and unethically charge things. We have this concept and the metric that we have actually on all reliefs and on our veterinarians. It's not how much money you bring, it's how much money per patient. So average check transaction is what we measure on every veterinarian and relief veterinarian. So essentially, you take number of patients the person sees, whether it's 2, 5, or 50, and then you take the revenue from those patients, divide, and then if you have enough sample size, you will arrive to average. So example, we had one vet, so average across our network is $600 per patient. And then we had a relief vet that averaging $284. That is 50% of what other veterinarians are doing. And it's not because she's doing things nicer. In fact, it actually was less appropriate medicine because of the discounts and compassion, and which is great, I think, in our profession. But if you discount in order not to do the blood work, not to do that ECG during surgery, and remove the services, then you're not doing either good for the patients or for the business. So I think that's important for veterinarians to understand, that if this is coming, and what Jessica outlined, which it is, just do better and be more competitive.
So we've said the word money and dollars a lot of times, so I have to throw it to the vet money geek. which is Grace. Everyone needs to check her out. Grace, how do you see this take off? I want to take off some of the compassion, right? Because that's one of the things I love about the vet world. I'm a business person, but this is the only place I've ever been where compassion can overwrite business in a lot of situations. And that's how Ivan and I met, because he just needed someone that was business exclusive minded to come in and help him with stuff. And it's a great partnership. We're great friends for a long time. And it's been one of those things, though. How do you see that for the clinic, for the relief veterinarian, for the entire system to make this work financially, find predictability in the finances? What tools, what strategies, what do you think people should do if you're going to give them kind of your own
Yeah.
toolkit of that?
I want to bring up something that's a little bit ugly and a little bit unsavory, but I think we need to talk about, the facets of our industry that aren't working compassionately. Just like Dr. Ivan said, he had experience where they did one model and they thought that was going to counteract all these other things, and then people took advantage of it. There is a conflict when you also have a multi-doctor practice, a multi-doctor shift, and you have a relief vet and you have an associate that's working on production. There is typically what can happen is as colleagues, obviously you want to talk about your life values and your business experiences, but what we always talk about is how much you're getting compensated for. And sometimes that conversation becomes, for the associate, very uncomfortable when they think about, well, my employer is paying this relief veterinarian way more than they're paying me, and I'm a full-time employee for you. So there is a switch in terms of how much, hey, is the compensation appropriate now for the associate vet when you're paying a much higher dollar to your relief vet, which has a lot of they have healthy boundaries in place in terms of what they can and cannot do, and what they will and will not do from a service portion. Some of the things that can happen on a particular shift is that for a relief vet that comes in and they've got a flat rate, and you've got an associate working side by you, and you're like, well, I don't need to track my production, so I'm going to give you my cases. And that's essentially, we've incorrectly padded the numbers for one doctor and reduced the numbers for the relief. And for the employer side, now they feel like, okay, nobody's got a really good skin in the game, right? Now the employer is feeling like they're being cheated out of a system that they're trying to put into place that should benefit everybody. So I think
they're paying a high hourly rate for the relief doctor, and then their production-based doctor is taking the highest production items throughout that day. So they're getting hit on both sides.
Right. And for most practices, because we're so compassion driven and we're so team oriented, we actually don't have a lot of workflows in place to track a lot of these metrics and a lot of these like run these reports and actually have time to sit down and look at this and digest this as a leadership team or a management team. There's a practice owner, there's a practice manager, but we're so heavily involved in the people management of the world that we don't have a lot of space and energy to look at our business as a black and white business. So when we come across these things, or when we end up in that conversation with that associate on their contract renewal, and they're saying, I know you pay so-and-so relief vet this much dollars, I want close to that, or I'm being underserved. That becomes a very uncomfortable situation for the business side to have to manage.
Is there, so one thing, and Ivan, I know you have a comment. One question though on that is that an opportunity for practice owners and clinic management teams to be more transparent about what it costs to have an employee, right? As an independent contractor myself, my health insurance is really expensive. I pay for that at whatever the top of the market is for everything. My insurance, my business insurance, my website, my computer, my rent, my everything are things that I'm saddling upon myself. And because that question comes up a lot of times too, right? As an independent contractor, I'll come in and help someone with their, you know, operations team or something, and they're saying, "Wow, we're paying you 3 times what we would pay our, head of ops." And you go, "Yeah, well, if you want to pay my health insurance and 25% of my rent and things like that, I'm more than happy to take less." Is that a place where maybe practice owners can break down some of that understanding for people to understand maybe what they're getting as an employee versus the expenses and the additional risks that relief veterinarians might be taking on?
Don't forget taxes.
And yes, 30+% or whatever else. Yeah, right. So so Grace, is that something that you talk about with your team, or Ivan as a practice owner, or Andrew as someone that's supporting relief veterinarians? What do you guys think about that?
Absolutely. That compensation package for an employee is very comprehensive. When you break down all the things that a business contributes to the health and longevity of every employee, that educational piece is usually missing. And you can't just say it once, just like with our clients, right? You can't just tell them to do something once. You have to, it has to be very transparent, very routine.
If I may add, so it is certainly an issue if it's imbalanced. And our locums, our relief veterinarians actually do make as a per shift, usually on a very busy day because of this production concept, or pro cell, I don't know what's the right word, production bonus. But everything that Ryan mentioned, plus Jessica, taxes, plus this is a gig economy. So when you're thinking, my lawyer makes $600 an hour, not 8 hours a day. So essentially, these shifts they're unpredictable. You take the risk of uncertainty. You're switching places. They might not have these shifts for you. They may hire full-time employees, so there's risk associated with it. So that's why relief vets should be paid more. And also, they will handle all their own business and health insurance and everything on their side. So, and on the employee side, if you have a comprehensive package that actually competes not only on one level, apples to apples. So in our network, for example, finally we found the right balance. Our employees have salary. If the entire organization makes profit quarterly, we share it. Everybody, reception technician, assistant, doctor, everybody gets a piece. And then on top of that, they own a piece of organization. So our relief vets don't own right now 5 clinics, soon to be 7. But all the people in the organization, that's what they get with an employment as a piece. So they have a short salary, medium, quarterly bonus, and long-term equity portion of it, where the relief would not. So if you will make it comprehensive and compelling, I think that looking at relief veterinarian, you'll say, okay, well, fine, they came in for one shift, made the money, but that's not what I do. And there's something that, aside from that, culture and intangible things that you want to be as a part of organization. So I think there's the right balance, and it's in many of those pieces where you need to make it compelling.
So I want to be cognizant of our time, because I know a lot of people, especially our relief veterinarians that are listening, probably have to go back to a shift, right? And they've got work to do. But I want to thank everyone for taking the time to do this. I think if I can, I'm going to give a few little call to action for each one of our panelists and for everyone listening. If you're a relief veterinarian, or if you're a practice owner and you're looking to bring relief veterinarians into your clinic, obviously check out what Serenity Vet is doing. It's really a great opportunity there. Jessica, I think you obviously have a really great opportunity for relief veterinarians to have that ongoing community and the support of participating in the Relief VMA, which I was so happy to learn about and have you be part of this. Grace, you do coaching, you do teaching, you help practices, you help people understand all the nuances and the numbers there. Ivan does a spectacular job with Galaxy Vets, and I know you guys are expanding the footprint and growing a lot of things there. I do a podcast, so I'd love for everyone to listen to that. And I think our final call out here is, if you've learned something from this or taken something from this, everyone that's here is going to get this recording. Share it with other people in your community. Let other people hear what this conversation is going on. Have them take the burnout survey. Have them participate in that. The only way that we can improve what we do as an industry is by talking about it. When there's an uncomfortable conversation, have the conversation and actually make sure that something can come from it. It's getting people like this together to have that. So with that, with my own personal soapbox, I want to thank everyone. I want to thank all of our panelists for joining us, and for everyone that's watching and listening for being a part of the conversation as well.